Good afternoon. My name is Jackie Ravella, and I'm here at Gateway Church with another interview with one of our congregation members. Miss Iris, thank you for being here today.
Hello.
Hi. So you've got quite the story here. Yes,
I do.
You do have quite the story. Let's go back to where I want to focus a little bit on how Jesus became a part of your life, your first time hearing about God, what that did to you, and we're just going to kind of work our way to where you are now. So, born in California.
Yes.
And how old were you when you first learned about Jesus? I believe you said you were raised by your mom and your grandmother.
Yes, so I was raised in a single mother with grandma household with my older sister, so it was all females, which was really cool. But we perused multiple churches. We did some Catholic, I think we went to a Mormon church, I don't remember. Jehovah's Witnesses, kind of whoever invited us, my grandma and mom, friends, we would just kind of go. But there was not anything big or major until I was about 15, and we had already moved to Washington.
Okay.
And that's where I kind of started to gather that God was bigger than what I thought.
Yeah, you mentioned something really fun, that some youth group friends at the church lost their keys, and they started praying about finding their keys, and they found the keys.
They found the keys.
And that was kind of an aha moment for you.
Yeah, that was like these people are not weird in a sense, but I'm like, what are they doing? So we had gone to the Benton Franklin Fair in Kennewick, and I remember that, they were different than what I had grown up around, like even the way that they talked and the way that they behaved in public was different than what I was used to seeing. And when the evening came and it was time to go home, we were with the kid who drove, and he couldn't find his keys. And all of these kids were like, well, let's look around. And it's the middle of the night because the fair gets over at midnight, so it's literally midnight. We're trying to get home in Kennewick, and I lived in Pasco, and I barely knew the area. And they're like, it's okay, we'll find the keys. I'm like, how are we going to find the keys?
Huge area.
Why do you think they're here at the car and not like, on the rides that we were on? And they're like, let's just pray. Let's pray that we find the keys. And they all hold hands and they start praying, and I'm like super confused but intrigued because I'm like, what is happening? And they start praying, and then they're like, okay, let's look again. And they start looking again, and then they find the keys in the middle of a field, in this parking lot, because the way that they used to park was kind of in the grassy area, and they found the keys. And I just was like, what just happened? So that was kind of cool, because I was like, wait, this might be real. This might not just be, a big man in the sky.
So when you were going to church prior, it was, we're going to church.
Yeah.
And it was some discussion about it, but then when you had kind of aha, like, oh wow, then you started thinking more like, okay, let me check into this. So at what age, you said, I'm sorry, what age did you come here?
I was almost 15 when we moved here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so after that experience happened, tell me what happened next. You kind of ran into something, and you thought that this was going to change your life when you went to church.
Yeah, so from meeting these kids and, realizing like they're a little different than what I was used to, I guess I wanted that. Like I thought, from the outside looking in, they had, perfect lives, right? Like they had stable homes and healthy relationships. And so I wanted that. I wanted the stability, and I wanted the community. So I started going to their youth group, and didn't really make connections with a ton of people in the church, just kind of the few kids that I knew. But I got invited to like a lock-in at the church where they kind of like I think they called it an encounter. So it was like a 3-day weekend where they had like worship and like individual prayer time. And there, during the worship, I had a crazy spiritual moment where now I know that it was the presence of the Holy Spirit. But at the time, I just was like, I feel really warm inside, and I don't know what's happening, but I feel good. Like, it's not scary. It wasn't weird. It was just like, I feel something. And that's when I started to realize that God was real and he was around me, not just, somewhere else. And so after that, I came home on that high, I guess, of like having this, super spiritual experience and, thinking, okay, like my life's going to be different now. Unfortunately, I came back to, craziness in my home, and I was in a relationship. I had a boyfriend, kind of, and like things didn't change in that situation. Like I still was making choices that I didn't, I guess, want to make, but I didn't know how not to.
Right.
So I had this, I had this really cool experience, and then the world came crashing back down, and it almost seemed like it was worse because now I knew I shouldn't be doing these things, but I don't know what to do next.
So did you feel like God was no longer there for you, and you had a high expectation, but then it's like, well, where is he, and why didn't things change?
Yeah,
not
kind
understanding
of.
his timeline.
And I unfortunately didn't have anybody to, I guess, walk me through everything I was feeling. I didn't have anybody at home that I could talk to about it. And then in the group, it was so large that I kind of got lost in the shuffle, I think. And I didn't reach out either asking, I didn't have a leader or anything that I could talk to. So I just kind of went back into my existence of how I was doing life before that. But now feeling like I remember that feeling. So that kind of little thing kept reminding me, like, remember how you felt that day? Like, I want that again. And so I always remember wanting to experience that again, but being unsure how.
So did you think about just going back to that particular church and seeing if you could get that feeling again?
I did, on and off. There were a lot of things that I think held me back from that, which were, I guess I had guilt because I was, living a life that I knew wasn't what God wanted,
right,
or what people told me, like, what you're doing is wrong. And so it almost just kept me away more than,
because you had mentioned to me when we initially talked that you felt like God wasn't there in your corner.
Yeah,
because you felt.
Yeah, so there were choices I had made after. So when I graduated high school, I was 18 years old. I had an abortion, and so I felt like that was another thing that was holding me back, that was keeping me back, I guess, was the choices that I was making were leading me farther and farther away from God, and I didn't know how to get back.
So what happened after that where you felt like you could get back? What steps did you take to get back to this?
So shortly after I had my abortion, I actually got pregnant again with my oldest right now, Sophia, and she, honestly, that was kind of the biggest experience that I had. Is I remember I was like, I don't want to feel how I used to feel, and I wanted to have a better life with her. Like, I wanted a fresh start, I guess. As a single mom, I was 19 years old and pregnant and super scared. But I remember just thinking, like, okay, God, I want to do this right. I'm having her. I want to have her, and I don't want to make another mistake. So it started there. I started to try to attend a few churches, and I didn't necessarily feel judged by the people at any of the churches I had attended, but I just never had connections that I had made with people. So that was a thing. And then the history of my past, like having an abortion and, making choices that I knew weren't right, but trying, I guess, to still look for that feeling that I had felt. I almost felt like God was staying away from me because of the choices I had made.
But you ended up having quite a turn of events.
Yes.
That was a very positive thing.
Yes.
When you had previously worked at a fast food place, and you worked with a gentleman named Brian.
I did.
Who is now one of our secondary pastors. So tell us about how that changed your life, and how God was a part of that.
So from trying to get back to church, I now have she was like 7 months old, and I was working 2 jobs and just surviving and trying to, have the best life for my daughter, and was not interested in dating at all. I kind of had a moment where I was like, okay, if it's just me and Sophia the rest of my life, I'm okay with that. Because the world is really scary, and I did not want to have a daughter and date people. But I went on it was called The Gathering. It was like a youth kind of worship night in the Tri-Cities, and a friend had invited me. So I had I think my mom babysat for me, and I was like, I want to go to this thing, because I still was trying to find that feeling that I felt. And so I went, and Brian had been invited by a mutual friend of ours, because we had all worked together prior to that, and he had already left Sonic at the time. But I still worked there. So he came, and we were like, oh, hey, like, I remember you, and like worship, and just kind of hung out and talked about Jesus. And, the night was over, and we all left, and I went home, and I got a Facebook, no, sorry, it wasn't Facebook, it was MySpace message.
Well, that's...
Man, MySpace message from Brian, and he was like, I had a lot of fun. And I was like, yeah, that was really cool. And so he was like, I'd like to hang out more. And I was like, yeah, that's fun. And I was like, yeah, let's do something. So he was like, let's go to a movie on a Sunday, which was my only free day. And I was like, okay, yeah, let's do that. And then 20 minutes later, I get another little message pop up, and it was like, just so you know, I mean, like, on a date. So he was trying to be very clear with what he was asking, which I appreciate, because I guess, some people are like, yeah, let's hang out, and then they're friends. And my thought in my head was like, okay, I know this guy, goes to church, and, he seems safe is the word I used. A lot of the time is he just seemed like a safe person to hang out with, like not expecting anything out of it, just like somebody to hang out with. And he knew that I had a daughter, so it wasn't like I had to be like, oh, by the way, I have a 7-month-old at home. He just seemed like a really easy person to hang out with. So we went to a movie, which happened to be on an Easter Sunday. And neither of us went to church that Easter. We just worked, and then went on our first date. And we went to a movie, hung out for a few hours. We walked around Walmart, just talking. It was just like the longest first date. We just talked and talked and talked. And it was time for me to go pick up Sophia from my mom's. And I was like, I have to go get her. And he was like, I'll come with you. So he came with me to pick up Sophia, which sometimes I'm like, how did I, have my baby with this person? But she was sitting in the back in her car seat, and we were in my car, and we just talked for more, like, it seemed like forever. And the end of the date basically was the conclusion of, he looked at me and he said, I do not want to be in and out of your daughter's life. So I want to keep dating you, but if we're going to keep dating, like, I want to get married. And me, who never does anything spontaneous, I plan everything I do, just was like, okay, that makes sense. And now that I think about it all the time, I tell people this story, and I'm like, I know now that that was definitely the Holy Spirit that gave me that peace, because there was so much peace when I just was like, that makes sense. Like, this is good. This is going to be good. And if my children came home and told me this story, that they were going to marry this person that they went on a first date with, I would probably advise them to maybe date a little bit longer or something. But I don't know. It was just very peaceful making that decision, saying, yeah, we're going to get married. And of course, our parents thought we were crazy. He had gotten out of a long relationship, and I had a 7-month-old. And everybody was like, you guys are what? And we were like, we want to get married. We want to do things the right way. You know, we want to honor God. Even though we weren't attending church, we just felt like this is what we wanted to do.
So you also told me that you weren't quite there yet with your past.
I still held on to that.
And so fast forward a little bit more to coming to Gateway. How did that happen for both of you?
So we were together. We had our daughter together, Adriana. So I had my second daughter a year later. We got married in September. So we got married. We were still trying to, like, I guess, do things the right way is, you know, what people usually say. But, you know, we felt this pull of, you know, going to a church. So we had attended a few churches, had some okay moments, but I still never felt what I felt that moment at that encounter. I still was, like, hungry for that feeling of, like, I know he's here. And we started attending Gateway when Brian, my husband, found out that Pastor Mel was coming back, because he had attended when he was in high school, and Pastor Mel had made such a big impact on his life that he wanted to come back here to, you know, attend or just, you know, be around Mel. And I had no idea who any of these people were, so I was just a little apprehensive at first, because I'm like, they knew you when you had another girlfriend, and I am here, and we have, you know, 2 daughters, and one of them is not biologically yours, and we had her before we got married, and I'm, like, already in my head thinking of all the things, you know, wrong, and why maybe we shouldn't come here. But we did, and it completely changed everything that I thought about myself.
And how did that happen? What did you feel? What was said to give you that feeling?
It was definitely a journey. So from the beginning, we maybe attended 2 weeks before Pastor Mel and Denise moved back, and kind of checked, you know, the little things out. I'm super introverted, so I'm not one to just, like, go meet people. But I did have, like, people come up to me and, like, greet me, and they knew, you know, obviously they kind of knew some of our past because it was so in our faces of, like, children and marriage. But they were welcoming. They weren't, you know, who's this new person that Brian brought and now has 2 children with? Like, what happened in the last, you know, 2 years that all of this has happened? No, everybody was very welcoming, which put me at ease immediately, because I was like, okay.
So you didn't feel judged?
I didn't feel judged at all. And throughout the last, you know, few years, Mel would give sermons on forgiveness and grace, and I just opened my eyes to something that I didn't realize is that I had been holding unforgiveness to myself for the decision that I had made.
But I think you also told me that as a part of his sermon.
Yes, so
it was one of the words.
Yes, he
that
did
you had
use.
experienced.
Yeah, so it was a specific sermon that he gave one time, and it was about forgiveness and, you know, forgiving ourselves. And he included, you know, people. He said, like, your past, and he even said, like, if you've had an abortion, like, God forgives you, like, he still loves you. And I just was, like, sitting in my seat.
That was
like,
a sign.
Okay, like, he's talking to me. And, you know, when you have those moments of, like, who told Pastor my past? Like, who told you all of this about me? Obviously, it was God, and it was the Holy Spirit. But I remember I did look over at Brian, like, what did you say? What did you say? And he was like, I didn't say anything. And that was really impactful. That was one of the big moments that I was like, oh, it's me that's holding me back from a better relationship with Jesus. It's not God. It's not hiding from me because he's like, he doesn't want to be around me because of what I did. It's me holding myself back from a deeper relationship because of my shame.
So from there, you felt at peace, like a weight off your shoulders.
Yes.
And you became a little more involved with church. You said, you were given some things to do, which kind of made you feel a little bit more involved with the church. And then now you and your husband are leading youth group. He is one of our pastors here. And is it my understanding that you at some point will be having your own church, hopefully?
Yeah, that's kind of the vision that God's given us. A few years ago, it was 2019, so it was before COVID times. God was really working in our lives, kind of what the next steps were going to be, and he kept pushing on me, God, not Brian, that I was going to have more of a part that I thought, because I was always happy being a pastor's wife and being in the background, because I don't like being up front. And I was completely fine just being in the background, helping with whatever I could, cleaning, setting food up, getting the kids, doing all of that part. I did not want to be in the front. And there was just like little moments of like, you can be up there. You could tell your story.
Which you have. So
yes.
Now there are times when you actually minister and speak in church.
Yes.
And you've had some very profound things that you've said that I believe have helped people. I've heard you several times, and I thought, whoa, because I don't really hear you talk much.
I know. I'm trying. That's something that God has been working on me. It's hard because I'm like, God, you made me this way. You made me, quieter, and I'm a little more observant. I'm always in the background, and I kind of just see what's going on. And but I think that also that's a little bit of a gift that He's given me, is that I can
speak.
Yeah.
You can speak. You can have a voice.
Yeah.
So maybe you said that God made you that way to be quiet, but do you think maybe you made yourself?
Oh, 100%. I did, yes. So I think that I've always, felt like I don't really have anything important to add.
But you do.
Especially, being a woman, that was really hard. But I like reminding myself that God can use anybody.
Absolutely.
And He wanted to use me and my story, and so I shared that I had an abortion in front of the whole church. Was so crazy, and I couldn't believe that I was doing it, but I did. And I shared, about, I think it was the first sermon I did, which is really funny because it was the last sermon that we had before we had to shut down for the pandemic. And it was about being stuck in the past. And not worrying about the future, which was so funny because then we all got shut down, and it was kind of intense. And I'm just like, okay, God, you know what you're doing, because I don't know what's going on in the world, but obviously you know what you're doing. So
what is it, would you say at this point, after being involved with Gateway for a while, that you like the most about it?
For me personally, is that it's like my second home. Honestly, it's actually my first home. My children have grown up here. We've been attending for 11 years. We have a 13-year-old, a 12-year-old, and an 8-year-old almost. So this is their home. This is where they've grown up. And it's really fun getting to see, people growing. But also I've had, some of the older people in the church come up to me and they're like, you're so different. You were so different from the moment you walked in here, where you were this quiet person. And I'm just like, it's not me, it's God. But to have a community that, they've known me and they know my past, and they know that I've, made all these decisions and mistakes that I felt were what was keeping me from God, that were actually what I needed to share. And they welcomed my stories. Even though some of them are hard and messy, I always have people that come up to me and they're like, I really needed that. And so that was always really good for me to
So maybe
experience.
in a sense where people out there are not feeling like they're alone.
Yes.
Because we're all in this together.
And I think that's why the tables are my favorite part. Which the tables are technically a newer thing for us because we've been here for so long. But it just made sense because we already were this community, and I think the tables just helped kind of close that into
Well,
a bigger community.
thank you so
Yes.
much for your time. This
Thank
has been an
you.
extraordinary story, and I am so thankful that I got to interview Iris. I mean, quite the journey and all the wonderful things she's doing now. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time when we do our next interview with one of our congregational members. Take care.